Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning, and thanks for tuning into O'Connor and Company. It is 8:06 on a busy Tuesday morning. Be careful out there. It's kind of foggy. We are chugging along here. I'm Julie Gunlock alongside Hans von Spakovsky. He manages the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation, and he is author of Obama's Enforcer, Eric Holder's Justice Department. Don't forget, it's Christmas. That would make a great book to buy.
Especially for Pam Bondi. So she reads my book. She knows what to do when she gets to DOJ.
It's a blueprint. Yes. That's right. Joining us now is Susan Ferrechio at the Washington Times. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
So you're going to give us the latest update on Trump's cabinet picks. Things seem to have turned around a little bit, especially for Pete Hegseth. Joni Ernst is now supporting his nomination. That's quite a turnaround, Susan, because she was pretty passionately against him. Am I saying that? I mean, don't you agree with that? Or I mean, maybe she was on the fence, but I feel like her turnaround on Pete Hegseth is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely call it a momentum shift for Pete Hegseth. I think last week the momentum was not going in his favor. There were signs that he was not going to get even the bare majority that he would need for confirmation. Don't forget, Republicans will have control of the Senate, so it's all on them basically. If you assume that Democrats wouldn't vote for Pete Hegseth, so the pressure was on Democrats, and it has been for weeks now to get behind Trump's cabinet picks. The general understanding is the president should be able to pick his cabinet. Over the years, of course, we've seen more partisan opposition to cabinet picks from presidents. That's happened increasingly over the past decade. And now you're at the point where there are certain cabinet picks that aren't going to get any Democratic support. So in this case, with Pete Hegseth, all the pressure is on Republicans at this point to support him. Yeah, Joni Ernst was one of the people who wasn't really behind him. She didn't say she was going to vote against him, but she had questions. There were other senators who said they also had questions, but were sort of on the fence. This did not go over well with MAGA world, with Trump's top allies who were saying to senators on the Hill, you better get behind these nominees because this is what people voted for. And if you don't get behind them, we're going to primary those of you who are up again in 2026. I think that is when you started to see momentum shift. And of course, what we saw last night was Joni Ernst. She met with Pete Hegseth a second time, and she announced that not necessarily a vote in his favor for sure, but that she was going to support him through the process and that they had a positive meeting. So things are now shifting more in his favor. He still has to go through a potentially very contentious Senate confirmation hearing. There could be real pitfalls for him there. He's going to have to shine in that hearing and be able to send off these challenges and questions about some of these accusations and stories that have circulated about him. That's going to be a really big deal. But at this moment, Julie, yes, it's shifted more in Hegseth's favor.
I think people, I agree. I think people felt like, okay, Trump should be able to make his choices. He should have the people around him that he wants, all of that. But I also think some of the passionate response to Pete Hegseth and sort of in defense of him has been that many people saw it as the Kavanaughing of Pete Hegseth, that many of these allegations were anonymous and, no sources on this stuff. And I think people are tired of that this is not the reason to sink a nominee based on, again, anonymous sources that are being promoted by media sources that obviously hate Trump. So, I think that probably had a little bit to do also with the pushback on Joni Ernst. Do you think Ernst will pay a price for this? Do you think there'll be a primary challenge? Because you mentioned the MAGA world. People are very angry at her.
Well, there's been threats already, definitive threats, and I've written stories about this too. And there are donors who are willing to fund these primaries. I think Elon Musk has made a threat about it. And don't forget, what did he raise? $25 million for President Trump. there's nothing an incumbent senator up for re-election hates more than a well-funded primary challenger. I mean, that just really throws a monkey wrench into your re-election plans. If you've got a well-funded primary challenger, nobody wants that. That's not to say these senators sit around and do everything based on what could happen to them politically. They also have their own, they want to do the right thing too. So there's that. I think the other problem with Hegseth is the fear amongst some people that he will just really disrupt the Pentagon, disrupt the military in ways that some people are not comfortable with. So there's that whole side of it as well. You could say, oh, well, look at all these anonymous claims and sources. But what about what he wants to do with the military? He's there, Trump picked him for a reason. And that is to be a disruptor and sort of rip out all the DEI roots that have taken hold in the military and make other big changes that people may not be comfortable with. And so that's part of the opposition as well, that you're not hearing them say it out loud. But I think let's pay attention to these confirmation hearings. It's going to be really interesting. Yesterday, Tulsi Gabbard was on the Hill. Now, she is the Director of National Intelligence nominee for President Trump. She's another nominee who I know from talking to senators that they have concerns and questions about her level of experience, even though she's a lieutenant colonel in the military, but they also are worried about her views on Ukraine, Russia, Syria, Iran. They want to talk to her more. She supports Trump, though, fully on all these issues. In fact, yesterday she came out and said that she backed the president following the developments in Syria and Bashar Assad's abandoning of the country. She got out and made a statement that she backs Trump, who we know tweeted over the weekend, we need to stay out of this. We need to stay out of Syria and not get entangled in another big mess in the Middle East. So she backs Trump, another disruptor, skeptical of the intelligence community. These are the kind of people Trump promised voters he would put in his cabinet. So there's the pressure on these Senate Republicans, and I've talked to them about this. They're saying, look, they need to, the will of the people here is that Trump was elected and that they liked who he was going to pick. Heck, he campaigned with them. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., they were out on the campaign trail with him, and now they are cabinet picks with RFK Jr. coming up for Health and Human Services Secretary. That'll be another wild confirmation hearing. But these senators are having to come to grips with this right now, and it's really rather interesting to watch the dynamic on Capitol Hill as they realize this. They feel the pressure, and they love their autonomy and advise and consent role, but they see the wave, the pressure from MAGA world and his supporters, President Trump's supporters, and it's having a real impact on this confirmation process.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that because the United States Senate is like the most exclusive country club in the country. But look, you mentioned hearings. Let me ask you this. In 2017, the Senate acted very quickly. In the month of January, they held hearings on more than a dozen of Trump's nominees before he even became president. And then they quickly held votes right after that. So he quickly got a cabinet assembled. Have we heard anything from the new leader of the Republicans, John Thune, about plans to do the same thing here?
Yes, they're going to move quickly with hearings. And I know from talking to individual upcoming committee chairmen that they're planning to hold hearings as soon as the Congress begins on January 3rd. They're going to start holding these hearings. They're going to move it along very quickly. And of course, as you know, Hans, on January 20th, the second president is sworn in. The Senate gavels into session, and they get right to work. I expect them to, if I were to take a wild guess, that Marco Rubio will be confirmed on January 20th. They want to get the big ones out of the gate. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. They usually move very quickly on that nominee, the major noms. Right on the 20th, they have them ready to go, and then as soon as the president is in office, don't forget, he hasn't officially sent his nominees to the Senate yet because he's not president. But once he is president, they get those nominations, and then they can just go with it and get his cabinet installed quickly. His problem back in 2017, President Trump, was there was a lag time in getting his cabinet in office. They blamed, at the time, Democrats' stalling tactics. FBI background checks stalled problems that they think that the deep state was implementing to trip him up and keep him from getting his cabinet in place. They don't want a repeat of that. They want to get the majors in there really quickly, and the deputies. They want to get this done and get rolling, because we all know that the mandate and the momentum for Trump to get in and make real changes in the country runs out rather quickly. He'll get into office, and they have about a year or two before the midterm elections start to interfere with things on Capitol Hill and gum up the works and make it hard to get things done. So he's got this wind at his back now, and they've got to move real fast. They want to do some of these big things like cutting the size of government, and of course this major plan for tax cuts and some other big changes on immigration and others. So speed is the word, Hans. So you're right about that.
Susan, your updates are always great. Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks, you guys.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Well, we had some great news out yesterday about Daniel Penny being acquitted in the death of Jordan Neely. He received a lot of applause in the courtroom, but outside of the courtroom, there are quite a lot of threats. They were calling for vigilantism from these BLM speakers. But someone else who was upset was AOC. Here are her deep thoughts. Cut 20.
If we do not want violence on our subways, and the point of our justice system is a level of accountability to prevent a person who does not have remorse about taking another person's life. I mean, even people who have engaged in manslaughter or have taken a life accidentally express remorse. And so the fact that a person may express no remorse indicates that there's a risk that it may happen again. And if we do not want to unleash that level of violence, then we should exert a level of accountability to prevent that from happening again.
Just once again, AOC proving how foolish she is. She's talking about violence in the subways. The violence was caused by a man who'd been arrested 42 times in her city and wasn't in jail.
Yeah.
What wasn't in a psychiatric hospital?
Yeah. We also had claims, and I want to play another clip from her, but we also had claims from people on Twitter that were saying things like, this man didn't deserve death. He deserved treatment and free housing. Well, actually, you mentioned 42 arrests. He was in court after one of those. I believe he assaulted a woman, and that judge offered him free housing and treatment for his drug problems. He left treatment. He left that housing after about, I think they said something like 7 to 10 days, something like that. So this man had been given opportunities to get clean and to get housing. But they're going to push this narrative. Let's listen to AOC again on Cut 21, where she talked about how the subway would be safer if we locked up people like Daniel Penny.
If we do not want violence on our subways, and the point of our justice system is a level of accountability to prevent a person who does not have remorse about taking another person's life. I mean, even people who have engaged in manslaughter or have taken a life accidentally express remorse. And so the fact that a person may express no remorse indicates that there's a risk that it may happen again. And if we do not want to unleash that level of violence, then we should exert a level of accountability to prevent that from happening again.
She is just, it's unreal.
If she wants no violence on the subways and she wants accountability, then let's get accountability for the city officials, law enforcement officials that allowed Jordan Neely to wander the city, attacking, as you said, women on the subway.
Yes. Yes. And really quickly, I want to just play this last clip. This is a BLM activist, Black Lives Matter activist, outside the courtroom after Daniel Penny was acquitted. Listen to the call for violence. Cut 23.
Just like everybody else has vigilantes, we need some black vigilantes.
That's right.
People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us?
Right.
I'm tired.
Can I talk about what a dangerous, pompous, I can't use the word I want to use for this BLM guy, but we should all be outraged at his call for violence. Because, in fact, what Daniel Penner was trying to do was to stop and prevent violence. I mean, Jordan Neely was threatening. He came in, as you mentioned, he came in saying, I'm going to kill people. I don't care if I go to jail.
Right.
He was trying to prevent that. And this vigilante guy from BLM wants to encourage more violence.
It's 8:23.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning, and thanks for tuning into O'Connor and Company. It is 8:37, and we are plowing through on this 10th day of December. I'm Julie Gunlock, sitting in for Larry O'Connor alongside Hans von Spakovsky, the coolest name in Washington. Good morning, Hans.
Yeah, I've had people say it makes me sound like a James Bond villain, but I'm not. I'm not one.
Well, I told you earlier that I keep calling you Prince Hans von Spakovsky. You sound like you should be in this sort of, celebrity social pages of
right.
hello, Anyway, we have an update on that suspect who was arrested in the killing of UnitedHealthCare CEO. This young man, his name is Luigi Mangione. Strange story, Hans. He was arrested in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Apparently, when he was arrested, he had the murder weapon with him. Including the silencer and a manifesto. Strange.
Well, plus he still apparently had a lot of fake IDs, but he had the ID he used to check into a hostel in New York.
That's right.
Like for being an Ivy League guy, he wasn't apparently very smart.
Yeah, I really have questions about this. Some people are asking, was he radicalized in college? I actually had a text from a friend who said that this private school that he went to is quite woke. Not surprising. Look, a lot of schools out there are, okay? And, we've talked about it on this show that, you don't, just because you leave the public schools does not mean that you leave the sort of woke-sphere. Some private schools are even worse than public schools. So that is an interesting tidbit. Or was it in college? He went to the Ivy Leagues. I mean, we know that those schools aren't exactly bastions of conservative thought. There are also claims about him having surgery and that changing his personality. Lots of questions to be answered here. We know also that he was from a rather prominent, rather wealthy family in Baltimore. What is interesting, and you kind of talked about this earlier, was his family owns golf courses and sort of a resort type property. But they also own a nursing home, which puts that family in sort of the healthcare realm.
Right, and supposedly we're hearing early reports that he was mad at the healthcare business, which is why he targeted the CEO of UnitedHealthCare. Something totally undeserved, unjustifiable, no matter what some on the left are saying about that. The fact that they could actually come out and say, it's understandable, that should shock the conscience of people, and no one who says anything like that should be in the public sphere.
That's right. One interesting thing, though, I'm reading from the New York Post here, which reports that Manhattan prosecutors filed first-degree murder charges against him. But on television earlier, we have our show, we have the TVs in the studio, we saw second-degree. I'm not sure what charges it is yet.
That's kind of confusing. If there's anyone that deserves first-degree murder charges, it's this guy, assuming he's, we have to, again, he's the alleged killer, but if he is, first degree is when you cold-bloodedly, intentionally plan an attack, and that's certainly what the killer did in this case.
The killer was on a security camera. You can watch the film. He shot the CEO in the leg and then, sort of cocked his gun so that he could shoot him again, and he shot him several more times.
Right.
The gun jammed, and he fixed it and shot him several times. So, I don't know how you get more clear than that. Mangione remains jailed in Pennsylvania. He was ordered to be held without bail during a court hearing on Monday night after he was charged. The family, again, this is a sort of prominent, wealthy Baltimore family has responded. His cousin, Maggiano's cousin, actually serves in the Maryland House of Delegates, and they responded saying, unfortunately, we cannot comment on news reports regarding Luigi Mangiani. We only know what we have read in the media. Our family is shocked and devastated by his arrest. We offer our prayers to the family of Brian Thompson, that is the CEO, and we ask people to pray for all involved. We are devastated by this news, the Maggiani family. Very sad. This is a story that will continue to develop, and we will continue to watch. Certainly tragic all around. We've got more to come. It is 8:42. Yesterday we talked to your colleague at the Heritage Foundation, Zach Smith, about
fair jumping. Fair evasion is how it is called, what they call it, and it's a significant problem. I mean, we think about people jumping over the barriers as something that happens every once in a while. No, it's become a rampant problem. 70% of riders don't pay, and DC Metro has lost nearly $50 million. So that is a real problem. And I mean, of course, in light of the Daniel Penny case, where the metro safety is also on our mind. In general, the metro's a mess. And now we have this rather, I shouldn't say hilarious story, because he really did get injured. But let's hear cut 27.
This rider tries to wiggle around the faregate and barrier at the McPherson Square mezzanine, and then suddenly falls, dropping down to the platform below. Metro says the rider in his 50s luckily didn't have a deadly fall, but his injuries were described by DC fire crews as critical.
Well, this is the faregate right here that the Metro rider was trying to get over. As he stepped over the faregate here, he lost his balance, and then you can see it is quite a ways down. That rider fell between the platform and the back wall here. DC Fire had to respond.
Yeah, so and you've been in the Metro, there are these sort of platforms and you take an escalator down.
Right.
So he fell all the way down, skipping the escalator. Now this was a fair jumper. It's become so common but this one took the sort of extra risky step of jumping over and then falling over to the platform below.
Yeah, no, in fact, I know that McPherson station because I used to get off there for a job, one of the first jobs I had in Washington, D.C. So that is quite a fall, but it's another reason why D.C. Metro needs to change its policy. The city decriminalized it. We've heard the manager say, we're not going to enforce this. They need to enforce it.
They need to enforce it, and obviously it has become a public health, a public safety issue here. But again, I think this is also, not to get too philosophical here, but this is also another sign of a breakdown in civil society. I mean, agree. People should, one of the steps that Metro took, which was sweet, but also kind of, I think we're a little beyond that, was putting up signs that say, please pay your fare, right? Pay your fare. I don't think that's, when you have 70% of riders not paying and a loss of $50 million, I think this has gone a little bit beyond pretty please. I think, as you said, I think the police really need to start enforcing this.
Well, yeah, and look, even folks who don't ride the Metro should be concerned about this because it's all taxpayers in D.C., Maryland, Virginia. We all subsidize the whole D.C. Metro system. So that $50 million that they lost, we make that up even when you don't ride the subway.
Yeah, and, Metro has tried, besides their pretty please notes, they've also tried installing taller fare gates at all stations to mitigate fare evasion. Metro said fare evasions decreased 82% after it started, replacing the barriers in 2023. But fare evasion still continued at some Metro station, even with taller and stronger gates. We've seen also that people figure out how to, they'll figure out how to get around any of these measures. So hopefully with some police enforcement, we will see less of this. And obviously, I hope this man who fell, apparently he has critical injuries. So I hope he doesn't. I hope he gets better.
Well, I do too. But again, this is a safety and security and money concern, all combined.
And again, we pay taxes, and surrounding areas help contribute to this. And we have constant breakdowns with the metro. We have complaints about the metro. We have safety issues from a rider standpoint of this sort of Jordan Neely situation where someone gets on the metro and you feel unsafe. And now we have riders who are trying to get past paying their fare and are hurting themselves, which, again, cost money because the fire department has to come and rescue these people who get wedged between a wall because they've tried to jump over the barrier.
Right. And causing huge delays for everybody else trying to use the system.
It is 8:52. That's a wrap. Thanks, Hans, for joining me today.
Julie, thanks for having me back. I had fun.
And now it's the great Chris Plant.
Fun is good. It's always good to have fun. It's fun is more fun than not having fun. And there's a lot of wacka-doodle-doo going on today. We got this. Nobody remembers Leopold and Loeb, but we got this Ivy League guy, the murderer of the CEO. I suspect that he thought he could get away with it all because he's smarter than everybody else, and there's a
exactly.
And it turns out he's going to have to get accustomed to prison life. And it's a pretty amazing story. And again, I heard you guys talking about a little bit there's the amazing family he comes from in Maryland, including a cousin who's in the State House, and he's a Republican, the State House cousin. Remarkable stuff. So we've got that, and then of course Daniel Penny in New York. The Democrats are on the wrong side of everything,
yes,
as always, and boy are they on the wrong side of everything today.